And just imagine this too. I mean, I had to laugh when I heard Trump say that he wants to invite Russia back into the G7. The Russians came out and went, "Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We're part of the organization of the largest economies in the world, and the G7. Hardly any of those people could qualify." And think about it: Great Britain's economy, non-qualifying; the French economy, the German economy, nope; the Italian economy, nope. Europe doesn't have a functioning economy. I mean, yeah, it's there, but it's not a world leading. This isn't the G7 is no longer the elites that sit down. The Indians are sitting there chewing their meal, going, waving at the Europeans, going, how do you guys like that? We're up here in first class. How's that? You're not even in business class, are you? Yeah, that's right. Economy. The Russians are living large right now. Europe's nothing. They're finished. It's hasta luego. Goodbye. Europe is pathetic. Europe is weak. Europe is nothing, but they can't admit it because they fooled themselves into believing there's something, and they're not. Everything about her exudes artificiality, hypocrisy, but she's a nobody. That's all Europe is. It's economy class, not even the good economy class, where you pay a little bit extra and you get the extra knee space. They're back in the real bad economy class where we're all crammed in. That's all they rate. And soon they're just going to be baggage. They don't even get a seat. So you make the mistake of believing they actually care about Ukraine or trying to do the right thing by Ukraine. They condemned 1 million Ukrainians to die. That's what they did. They did it because they have a artificial understanding of Europe's role in the world. They think Europe's a player. Europe's not a player. Peace through strength. Well, good luck with the strength part. I mean, that's like, me going to the gym with a young Arnold Schwarzenegger and bragging about how strong we are as a team. Strength, baby, strength. We're so strong. And then Schwarzenegger leaves and I'm left there looking at the weight room going, and everybody's like, where's that strength now, Ritter? I lost Schwarzenegger. Europe only has strength when America's involved. We are the strength. We are the only strong partner out there. No one else in Europe has any strength, any measurable strength. And so why do they keep talking about it? I mean, Europe can't pony up. They don't have anything to put on the table. They don't have any viable military force. None. NATO is a fake entity, a paper tiger, artificiality. It only works with America. We not only have to be the glue that holds it all together, but once we put it all together, we then have to bring in the Schwarzenegger-like character to be the real strength, because Europe is just a pathetic old man who can't lift weights anymore, like me. So I don't know why we keep playing her, and I don't know why we keep playing Collis, and I don't know why we keep playing any of these European officials. They don't matter. The only people in Europe that matter are national leaders. But the national leaders that have subordinated themselves to Europe have made themselves irrelevant, like Olaf Scholz. Look at the panic of Scholz right now. I have to declare a national emergency now. Why? Because America's not backing us up. Oh, you've decided you want to be a sovereign nation state now, a national emergency, because you realize that Europe is fake. And America's not there to hold your hand. And wait till he finds out we're pulling out 20,000 troops. I mean, I think that's the number. It might be more. Because we're just done with Europe. Europe is a failed experiment. We're not talking about Russia attacking Poland. We're talking about Poland threatening Russia by initiating offensive military operations that they don't have the ability to do. So no, nobody's a threat to Russia. And that's the reality. And because Russia knows this, Russia's not overreacting. Russia's done what is necessary to strengthen its borders. Because Finland and Sweden joined NATO, Russia has to respond. That's why they have 70,000 troops in the new St. Petersburg military district. So they solved that problem. They reinforced Kaliningrad as necessary. They reinforced up in the Kola Peninsula as necessary. They've given Belarus nuclear weapons and Oreshnik. Again, come on, Poland, really. Bring it on. Nothing that Lukashenko would like to any more than to go release the Oreshnik and let 9 Belarus Oreshniks fire into Poland and kill everything it touches. There's not a single European nation that threatens Russia. There's not a collection of European nations that threaten Russia. Poland's nothing. Nothing. Literally nothing. What are they going to do? Invade? Poland will do nothing. Nobody in Europe will do anything. They can't. I, again, ask people to take a look at the true state of affairs of the Polish military. They may have a lot of soldiers, but now try and take those soldiers, organize them in a fashion where they can project power in an offensive strike, thrusting deep through Belarus, through Ukraine to actually threaten Russia. Imagine the logistics problems that are created by that, lines of communication. Then imagine them trying to survive as the Russians, destroy their entire logistical infrastructure in Poland with longer-range strike missiles that Poland doesn't have a defense against, destroys the Polish Air Force in place, destroys Polish command and control, destroys the Polish energy infrastructure, and isolates and annihilates every one of the troops that got extended forward. The entire Polish army would be destroyed. That's the true reality of NATO. It's a joke. It's a farce. It's fake. And now you have the Europeans talking about creating a European army. With what command structure? How is that going to work? Are the French going to subordinate themselves to the Poles? Because the Poles say, we're a frontline state. We have to be in command. You think Germans are going to let the Polish command German troops? It isn't going to happen. America commands because we kicked everybody's ass. We were large and in charge. But when we withdraw, the British? What moral authority do the British have? How many troops they could bring? They used to have the British Army on the Rhine, 90 to 100,000 strong. Not anymore. Now they can't even fill up a soccer stadium. So the British are going to be in charge? The Poles? No one's going to listen to the Poles. The French? They've got nothing. They can't bring anything. The Germans? They're confused. There's going to be an election coming up, in March? And AfD may win. And when that happens, God help Europe. Because you think J.D. Vance, put a turd in the punch bowl with his speech in Munich? Wait till AfD says, yeah, we're out of the European Union. And then now Sikorsky's great plan for a year. There will be no more Europe. Germany withdraws from the European Union. It's dead. It's gone, finished. So it's all fantasy right now. It's just stupid. Sikorsky's the same idiot that posted a photograph of the gas bubbling up after the Nord Stream attack and said, thank you, America. This is the level of intellectualism that we're dealing with here. So why do you take anything this man says seriously? He's not a serious player. He's a Russophobe. He's irrational, and his words have no link to real power. Nothing he says is going to happen at all. So the Europeans really need to be careful here. I mean, you were happy to be our subordinates for several decades, but now the reality has to come home that you are our subordinates. That means that you literally have to do what we tell you to do. You're not sovereign. You gave that up a long time ago, and you can't afford at this juncture to suddenly unilaterally declare yourselves to be sovereign entities. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. You bought into this game. You have to pay the price. So Europe just has to be really careful about making threats to America, because see, we can follow through on every threat we issue. They can't. Without American involvement, every single European defense industry collapses. Without American involvement, every single European defense industry collapses. There's not a single European defense industry that can survive without the Americans somehow subsidizing it, etc. Left on their own volition, they will all collapse because they aren't organized to survive as sovereign entities. We can shut down each one of the European economies. Not a single European economy or a collection of your economies can shut down America's economy. So what I say is we got the big three. Divide the world into three spheres of influence, nuclear influence, and give the lead. Each one of these spheres, you get a lead, a Russian lead, an American lead, a Chinese lead. And you say, as we negotiate as the three, we have to also negotiate with these other people. Everything has to be linked together so that as we go down, we all come down together towards the same objective, which is zero. And it could happen. Donald Trump, as the president, can make this happen because he's the only one that's willing to think outside of the box. Hell, we couldn't even engage in discussions with the Russians because we played stupid games like, well, the NATO deterrence is a NATO deterrence. They're American bombs. No, but it's NATO deterrence, so they can't factor into anything we're talking about bilaterally with the Russians. What about the French and the British? No, that's French and the British, but they're part of NATO. Well, yes, they are, but the Russians like, how can we have? That's why the Russians can't go any lower. They are right now. The numbers they have are the numbers that are needed to deal not only with America, but France, Germany, and NATO, which is a nuclear issue. If you want to get the Russians to go lower, all these things have to go down too. And eventually, if you're United States, you got to convince the French and the British, you just give them up. Give them up because we're going down to zero. We're going to create a situation where we don't have to worry about that. There's no longer a need for a nuclear deterrence anymore. Give them up and we get down to zero. We get the North Koreans to get rid of it. Now, Donald Trump says, I want to denuclearize North Korea, but you can't do that unless America is willing to start. So that's why he's saying, yeah, we got to start bringing it down too. This guy is common sense. Does he have all the details out there? Hell no. I mean, but you know what? He has a director of national intelligence coming in who has the ability to create the intelligence support infrastructure, help this president get to where he wants to go, to bring in the right minds, to get the right people to think, because you can't rely on the arms control establishment that exists in America today, although the Washington, D.C. think tanks, because they're not about arms control. They're about nuclear arms sustainment. Read the stuff they've been writing for, I apologize for the language, but it is what I said it was. It's just total crap. Tulsi Gabbard can build a new infrastructure to support this president. This president wants to do the right thing. And Aaron Mate gets full credit for this. He posted those words out there, but he said, this isn't going to happen because this is literally taking on the establishment. This is taking on the most deeply entrenched part of America. This can't happen without the support of the American people. And we have a president that knows how to mobilize the American people. This is a man that can go out there and hold massive rallies. And imagine if he started going around the country talking about getting rid of nuclear weapons, about disarmament, about making America safe again by getting rid of these weapons, and get the public up. The political support for continuation of the nuclear enterprise will dissipate, will go away. This is the president that can do it. He's the only one that could do it. Read what they've been writing. They aren't about getting rid of nuclear weapons. They're about justifying the continued existence of nuclear weapons. They glorify nuclear weapons. They keep pretending they want disarm, but then they say, well, no, now we need to actually make new plutonium pits in Texas because, we need to consider doing underground nuclear weapons testing, because if we don't do that, then you're not in favor of nuclear disarmament. Don't tell me you're about arms control and disarmament if your arguments are for justifying why we need to build new nuclear weapons and all that kind of stuff. So he has to jettison all that. That's the establishment. That's the deep state. They're linked to the military-industrial complex. They're linked to the nuclear weapons establishment that has hijacked national security. We now have Doge going in and starting to clean things up. Wait till they start looking at the nuclear enterprise and they see how much money has gone down that wasteful garbage heap. Joe Biden ran on a platform in 2020 of what is called the sole purpose doctrine. The sole purpose of America's nuclear weapons is nuclear deterrence and not anything else. It would have gotten us away from any concept of nuclear preemption. He ran on that, said, I wanted to do it. Then he became president, and instead he puts out a national security guidance and a nuclear posture review that just keeps the old preemption in place. We had a reunion of INF treaty inspectors and negotiators, the original hardcore arms control people of the United States, the guys who actually did something in arms control. I'm proud to be part of that community. And we had one of our old colonels stand up and ask the question of the Biden administration's lead arms control person, why? How did this happen? This is the president. This is what he said. All but inevitable. So the easiest thing Trump can do right now, once he begins talking with the Russians, see, you have to solve the Ukraine problem. And then you have to tell the Russians, we no longer have a policy seeking your strategic defeat. That policy used to be implemented via proxy in Ukraine. Once we solve that problem, then we have to convince the Russians that we're not looking for another vector to strategically defeat Russia, that we aren't in that game anymore. And once we do that, and the Russians believe that, then we can come in and say, let's talk arms control. But the first thing we have to do is extend New START by 5 years. Get that extension in there. What that does is it prevents an arms race. And then we can sit down with the Russians and say, how do we cut? And meanwhile, you send a signal to the Chinese saying, look, we extended it, we've frozen it, now we're talking about cutting it. What we need you to do is slow down. We're not in a treaty relationship with you yet, but stabilize find a number that you're going to stabilize at so that we have a mark we can bring it down to. And then when we're all equal, we can get together. But here comes the hard part. How do you get the Chinese to get rid of nuclear weapons or meaningful strategic cuts when India has a nuclear arsenal? So India's got to get involved in this. But how do you get India involved without Pakistan getting involved? And how do you get Pakistan involved without getting Israel involved? And what he wants is basically to create the big three. Now, I think Modi in India might have some issues with that. India might have to become the modern day version of France, where you're carving up Germany at the end of the war and the Russians are going, we're here. The British are going, we're here. And the Americans are going, we're here. And the French are going, but what's about us? We're here too. Oh, yeah. Okay. Give the French a little bit thing here. So we might have to make room for India. I don't know. I hope the Indians watching this don't get mad at me because they are a big power. But in Trump's mind, although Modi was just there, I mean, think about it. Of all the players, has he met with Putin yet? Has he met with Xi yet? No. He pulled the chair out from Modi and pushed him in. All right. So he's met with Modi. So Trump's not stupid. Trump's pretty damn smart. And what he wants is to get together and he looks at the problems of the United States. $34 trillion, $36 trillion. Hell, who the hell knows? We found out that America can't account for anything anymore, so it could be whatever the hell we want it to be. But we do know that left unchecked because of interest rates and everything, it's going to be $54 trillion before we know it. And then it just gets out of control. It's already out of control. And he wants to bring it in control. And one of the ways you do that is to bring control on defense spending. He said, I want to cut the defense budget in half. That's easily done. Hell, I've written about this in the past. It's the easiest thing in the world to do once you just accept the necessity of doing it and not being afraid to step on toes of people who make money for doing nothing. Because right now, a whole bunch of our defense budget is giving it to people who do nothing to promote the defense of America. We just told Europe, remember, it wasn't just but a year ago that we had a president talking about the sacred obligation of the United States to Europe. There was no sacred obligation. He was part of the establishment. The establishment had transatlantic bonds with the European establishment, and they played off of each other. It's not about the American people. The American people don't have a sacred obligation to Europe if Europe's job is to undermine American democracy. And we take umbrage at any notion. When I have the British saying that they can come across the water and arrest me and take me away because of a post I put on the internet, I say, bring it on. And I love J.D. Vance. Bring it on, Europe. You want to do this? You want to play that game against us, America? You want to call it the ugly American? I don't care. I don't care anymore because we're trying to break free of the old ugly America. We've got a president that says that we shouldn't be running around, trying to solve problems militarily, that these are economic issues. He'd like to flex America's economic muscles. Good luck with that. I don't know how strong those muscles are, but he's done with the war game. He's done with playing the bomb game, and yet the world seems upset with this. And I'm sick and tired of that. If you want to bomb the world, Europe, build your own damn airplanes, build your own damn bombs, and pay the damn consequence. Don't expect us to do it for you. One of the biggest wastes we have out there is the nuclear weapons enterprise. We just spend a lot of money for a weapon we can never use because if we use it, we all die. And to accept this is the insanity of the United States for so long, is to say, well, we have to have it. But the problem is if you have it, then you got to use it. Remember, it was Biden administration that said, we're ready to have a nuclear exchange with Russia. They're ready to have a nuclear war with Russia, stated by a nuclear war planner and strategic command, acting on the instructions given to him by the Biden administration. This was in November, ladies and gentlemen. The United States was ready to have a nuclear war with Russia. That's insane. The literal definition of insanity. Thank God we have a president now who's saying, no, we need to get rid of these weapons. It's a difficult path. The Chinese have already come out and said, Thanks, but no thanks. You and Russia got these huge nuclear arsenals. You guys work on getting your arsenals down, and then we can talk. You lead by example. And when the Russians are talking to the United States about nuclear reductions, we have to factor in the French and the British. And also, the United States is going to say, well, what about North Korea? So now we just identified all these things. So, an idea that I'm actually publishing an article today that I'm promoting this, we have to create a new paradigm of nuclear disarmament that is global in scale. See, Trump is already thinking smart, getting the big three together. But I'm telling you, Miranda, the big three can't talk about meaningful reductions unless you take into account the other factors that lead to the necessity to maintain nuclear deterrence. We're not giving up weapons if North Korea has weapons. It ain't going to happen. So, and North Korea is not giving up weapons as long as we have weapons. India's not giving up weapons. Pakistan's not giving up, the whole thing. Well, the easiest thing Trump can do right now, and I'm a strong advocate of this, is when he starts talking to the Russians, because remember, under Biden, we weren't talking to the Russians. There's one arms control treaty left, the New START treaty. It expires in February of next year. If it expires, there's now no constraint, and we will have an arms race that'll bankrupt everybody involved and make nuclear war. The money that was allocated by the Biden administration, what's left of that continues to flow. There was no way the Biden administration was going to squeeze that tube of toothpaste clean before they left. And that money hasn't been stopped by the Trump administration. Indeed, there's been, for instance, the transfer of Patriot batteries back to Raytheon to be refurbished before moving on back to Ukraine, the transfer of 90 missiles, Patriot missiles. This, I think, is even an addition too. So there is this flood, but the United States is no longer the lead coordinator. We've backed out of the Ramstein coordination group. NATO now has the lead. I think it's the British have the lead on that, and Europe just simply can't do this job. It's the whole thing about the military supply line into Ukraine is collapsing as we speak. They're able to put in spurts in here, but what Ukraine needs is a fire hose, not a garden hose, and they don't have the fire hose anymore. And the other thing is that the Ukrainians, their manpower situation is collapsing on a daily basis. I mean, Zelensky came out with an interesting comment, which is the truth. He says we can't have presidential elections, because if we have presidential elections, we'll have to suspend military operations. And the moment we suspend military operations, our army ceases to exist. Everybody will flee the front. There's a huge desertion problem right now. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian troops are fleeing. If you recruit 10 soldiers and send them to the front line, 6 of those are going to desert within a day. And then the others are going to surrender to the Russians, and those that don't surrender die. This is the reality. Ukraine's manpower situation is a crisis that can't be resolved. According to Budanov, the head of their intelligence, Ukraine will cease to exist by the summer of 2025. Now, that could be an exaggeration designed to, scare the West, but the fact is the Ukrainians are in a lot of trouble. The longer the peace, the longer they delay implementation of what will be a surrender, the more territory they'll lose, the more manpower they'll lose, and the greater the collapse will be. I don't think Ukraine survives this year, but I didn't think Ukraine was going to survive 2024. It doesn't matter if we keep sending equipment in. There's nobody to operate it, and there's no structure to employ it properly. It just is, wheat and grist for the grinder. In the end of the day, it's up to the Russians to decide, how much pressure they want to put on Ukraine. The more pressure Russia puts on Ukraine from a military standpoint, the more Russian soldiers die. And from Putin's perspective, and I believe this was articulated in a conversation with Donald Trump, the Russians aren't in the mode of let's kill as many Russian soldiers as possible. I think the Russians realize they've won this war, and what they need to do is just continue to put pressure on Ukraine, but in a manner which minimizes Russian casualties. And we're talking about minimizing Russian casualties in a high-intensity conflict, situation, which means there's going to be significant casualties no matter what. And one by one, this concept of sovereignty is returning to European states. But every time a European state dares say we're sovereign, we don't support it, they're accused of being a tool of Russia. They're attacked, they're undermined. Nations that wanted to join the European Union, like Georgia, aren't allowed to have free and fair elections, apparently. No, they have to surrender to the outside influences brought in by Europe and the United States, the old United States, not the new United States, because the new United States just dismantled that entire infrastructure, the one that underwrote the most undemocratic activities imaginable in Georgia and elsewhere. And in Europe, we're done. We're finished. Hooray. This is the revolution. I said it was coming. I said it's going to happen domestically. Anybody who doesn't think that what's happening here ain't a revolution, you're dumber than dirt. And now it's happening globally. You want to fight the Russians? Have at it. They've kicked your ass regularly. You know, I seem to remember in the history books, Russian troops marching through Paris. Oh, they also marched through Berlin. They'll do it again if that's the game you want to play, you stupid, ignorant punks. But we're not going to back you up. We're not going to support it anymore. We're done with you. Arrest me. When you have cops able to come in and kick down the door and arrest you for posting a meme online, our fellow journalist, Richard Medhurst, is under investigation because he dares speak out about bad policy in Gaza. England's not free. England doesn't represent the values that I cherish. Germany doesn't represent the values that I cherish. Europe doesn't represent the values that I cherish. The country that is actually closer to these values than Europe is Russia. I've been there, seen it firsthand. And I will tell you right now, there's more free speech in Russia. It's not perfect. You can't get away with everything in Russia, but there's more free speech in Russia than there is anywhere in Europe today. And that's for damn sure. I am disgusted by Europe. I don't believe Europe as an entity truly exists. It's this fake thing, the European Union, that's been superimposed over nation states that have forgotten what it means to be a nation state, sovereignty. And Europe, stick it in your ear. You guys got to pay for your security. We're not. I think you're going to see in the next couple of days announcements about the withdrawal of American troops from Europe. We're done with this nonsense. We're done with this mess. Last century, we went across the ocean twice to solve Europe's problems. We're not going to do it again. We're done with you guys. Fix it yourself, especially now that you have, well, at least you had, functioning economies, but you destroyed them. You trashed them by signing up with the sanction. And if you're going to say, well, America made us do it, then that just shows how weak you are. But, America didn't make you do it. The Biden administration made you do it. Had you stood up, maybe it wouldn't have happened. But now we have a new administration, a new sheriff in town that's saying, we're done with you. We're disgusted by you. We don't support you anymore. And he's calling them out. It's the best speech delivered by an American in the history of the Munich Security Conference. The best speech, the strongest speech, and the one that will have the greatest impact, because J.D. Vance put Europe on notice that we're finished with you. And all the Europeans that were thinking America would never unplug, think again. We're done with you. I mean, you are literally the problem. J.D. Vance called it out. You're the problem. Europe's the problem. You create all the problems. Everything could be solved if Europe would just stop being stupid, led by unelected bureaucrats who come in to try and impose an agenda that nobody in Europe supports. Put it up to the vote of the people of Europe. They will not support this ridiculous agenda. And now they're talking about doing the same thing in Germany, annulling a political party because they disagree with the stance that the people of Germany may take by providing their votes to this political party. Europe is this fake conglomerate of political elites and economic elites who seek to service the United States. And that's what they've been doing, servicing the United States economically and politically. But, we've had weak leadership in America that lost track of the fact that we're supposed to be the bosses. And we allowed Europe to take over in Ukraine. Thank God we finally have a president that said, no, we're ending this stupid war, the dumbest of all wars. And J.D. Vance is 100% correct. Don't sit here and pretend that you embrace democracy. I mean, we support Ukraine, a free and democratic. There's nothing democratic about democracy, about Ukraine. It's a military dictatorship, literally, in every way, shape, and form. So don't call it a democracy, but Europe's been confused about what democracy is for a long time. J.D. Vance is 100% correct to call out what happened in Romania, where the Romanian people made a choice for change. The Romanian people made a choice for change. Sovereign people of a sovereign nation. And yet Europe came in and intervened with fake manufactured intelligence, sent it up to the Romanian security services, to Romanian courts, who acted unilaterally to annul the will of the people, only to later on admit, no, there wasn't any Russian interference. None, zero, zip. They just didn't like the outcome. What happens when Donald Trump says, now we're done with NATO? Now Europe's going to have to come in and set their own table. See, Trump and Russia can create their own reality just by coming up with an agreement. Now, there's lip service going to be paid for Europe and this and the other thing. But, the bottom line is they said America's not putting troops on the ground in Europe, in Ukraine. Zelensky said he can't even consider a peacekeeping force without American troops. So now there's not going to be a peacekeeper. But let's say he changes his mind. Okay, I'll take those Europeans. I'll take 100,000 Europeans. But then the United States said, yeah, but you don't get Article 5 protection. So any Europeans that go in there, you're not part of NATO, which means if you piss the Russians off and they kill you all, you're on your own. And there's not a single European nation that's going to do that. So how can Trump make an agreement without Europe? I just told you how. Europe doesn't matter. Trump can make whatever rules he wants to, and Europe will have to fall in. It's an American-based reality as far as Europe's concerned. It's a Russian-based reality as far as solving the issue of Ukraine is concerned. And I think that Trump is willing to do what's necessary to concede to Russian realities. You heard Hegseth talk about it. And so that's the reality. There's going to be no American troops, no NATO. We're cutting off military support for Ukraine, which means Europe's going to have to step up. And, the price tag gets really, really outrageous at this point in time. It's not just, Europe proved they can't afford the 2% GDP that was necessary to make NATO viable. That's why NATO's so weak. But now, in order to, be part of an American participation, they needed to get that number up to 5. None of them can afford that. And now America's pulling out. That participation, taking the lead now is 10 to 15%. It's it. Europe can't take the lead. The realities. I mean, screw Europe. Ukraine will never, ever, ever, ever be a member of NATO. It's as simple as that. I don't care. You can have, Starmer, we are committed to Ukraine being. No, you're not. Remember, NATO is a consensus-based organization. And when Big Daddy says no, that's the end of it. End of discussion. Kids don't no longer get to scream, we want chocolate. Daddy said no. What you got Sweden now? The newbies regretting their vote already to join NATO, saying, no, they're going to be part of NATO. We guarantee it. No, they won't. Ukraine will never, ever, ever be part of NATO. It doesn't matter how many pathetic European leaders come out and say so. It isn't going to happen because Big Daddy said no. So the realities will define this situation. That's how it happens. Because Europe can't do anything. They can't do anything. We'll set the conditions. You have to pay for it all, Europe. You have to go in. No protection from Big Daddy. You want to play big, jump in the playing field with Russia and try to impose some sort of security arrangement in Ukraine without Russian concurrence? It's on you. And when Russia bombs you, Daddy ain't going to be there to help you. They just defined the fact that Europe can't do it. So it's not about keeping the Europeans out. Europe can't even come in and play the game. They can't buy into the table. The United States and Russia have set a high-stakes poker game. And Europe wants to come in with a handful of $5 chips. It doesn't work that way. You got to bring the $1,000 chips and you got to have a whole bunch of them. And they don't. And once the war in Ukraine ends and once the situation becomes resolved and the border becomes defined, the American troops are out. There's not going to be a permanent American large-scale presence of American military power in Poland. We're done with Europe. Hegseth said, Fortress America, he used that term, and he said we're pivoting to the Pacific. We're unplugging from Europe. I think right now, the primary will be Germany. I think the way Vance was talking is that he's disgusted with Germany. disgusted with what Germany has become, and that when he was in Poland, he spoke about, maybe even more American troops coming into Poland. So I think what you're going to see is 20,000 American troops going home, and headquarters staffs that were in Germany relocating to Poland. He said that that's essential until the Ukrainian border is defined. But here's the thing about the Poles. Those troops aren't there forever. So even if it's a temporary reallocation of resources to Poland, the Poles need to understand that that's temporary, that long-term we're looking for peace with Russia, not a permanent state of conflict with Russia. We're looking to resolve those issues, and the Poles better get on board, because we're not going to be there to hold their hands. And at the end of the day, when we leave, Poland's going to have to be able to either be big enough to stand up to Russia. Why? Russia isn't looking for a war, or change their mindset. And again, I think you'll find as this wave of change, the reality of the necessity for change sweeps over Europe, governments one by one are going to fall. They can't get in line with the new reality. There's not going to be any governments that survive long term who say, no, we're standing up to America. No, you're not. No, you're not. You understand there's a president right now that will stop all LNG shipments to Europe in a heartbeat. He'll just turn the ships around. Say, I could go sell them to Asian markets. A lot of the Asians are a little pissed. We want to compete with the Russian gas in China. And you had the Chinese foreign minister say, why should we stop buying Russian gas? It's there, it's readily available, and who's going to provide gas to replace it? Don't tell us what to do. But the United States might say, well, we want to start competing in that market more by reallocating LNG shipments that are headed to Europe. And then the Europeans are now screwed, because A, they're going to have to buy on the spot market, which is going to make the prices explode. And B, they're going to have to buy Russian gas because there's no other alternative.